I'm Rob.
And I'm Rob.
And this is Ask Rob and Rob.
Hello everyone, welcome to Ask Rob and Rob, the show where you get your questions in and we give you some answers in return. A pretty simple format, but it is pretty simple to get on the show. We've got 2 brilliant questions coming up, but before we get to it, let's give you a quick reminder of how you can get your question in.
Yep, give us a call, 013 808 00035, or head on over to propertyhub.net/ask. Both of those methods will allow you to leave a voicemail, send your question over to us, and then we'll answer it just like we're about to do right now for John.
Hi Rob and Rob, it's John here. I'm a big fan of the podcast and I found Rob's book fascinating, couldn't put it down until I finished it. My question's regarding quantitative easing and quantitative tightening. If I understand correctly, then quantitative easing's had a big role in the increase in house prices we've seen over the last decade or so. But it looks more and more like we're heading towards a period of quantitative tightening. So my question is, what effect could this have on house prices? If quantitative easing helped to increase prices, is it possible that quantitative tightening will help to erode the prices? Thank you.
John, thank you for the question. Thank you for reading the book. You're a man of great judgment and refinement when it comes to your reading material. So to bring everyone up to speed on your question, quantitative easing, called QE for obvious reasons, is basically when the money supply is increased by the Bank of England and given out to people by various mechanisms in an attempt to either avoid or get out of a crisis or just to get things going again. And quantitative tightening, QT, is the opposite, where they reverse those measures. And they could do that for a couple of reasons. One is because the economy is running too hot and they want to try and cool it down. And the other is just that they don't really want to be in the business of buying and owning more and more and more. So what they should really be doing is doing QE as needed and then doing QT to get back to zero. And so they can then do it again next time if they need to. As you've said correctly, John, QE can inflate asset prices. So this happened after the crash of 2008, where the Bank of England created a whole load of new money, dished it out to financial institutions, which pushed up the prices of bonds and stocks and property, you name it, just about everything. They then did it again in 2020 because of COVID. They did it in a different way that actually didn't necessarily push up asset prices in such a direct way, but gave everyone more money to spend in the real economy, as in like actual stuff, not just assets. And now they've done so much of all that, they're now talking about reversing it. So what effect could this have? Well, the effect as a whole is indeed negative for all asset prices because it's the exact reverse of what they did earlier. However, it's probably not going to make a meaningful difference to anything for a couple of reasons. One reason is that it's going to happen very, very slowly. So QE is always a response to something going wrong. Therefore, it's all done quickly in one big bang. They want to see that impact. They never want to do that in reverse. So it's always going to be a gradual process. So their sales of assets will happen very gradually over a very long period of time because they don't want that reverse to take place. The other reason it's probably not going to have much of an effect is they're probably not going to do it. There was talk about QT, as in selling assets, for a few weeks, but then in the aftermath of the mini budget, when the bond market went nuts, they actually didn't do QT at all. They actually did more QE. They went and printed an additional £65 billion. So even if they do try to get back to proper tightening, clearly the economy can't take that much of it, and it certainly can't take it very quickly. So this is not a good thing for the country as a whole. It's not a good thing for the health of the economy. It implies that when we do next get a big blow up, it is going to be a very big one. But in terms of what it means for you as an investor, the answer is probably not very much. But as an investor, it is really important to keep on top of everything that is happening at this big and somewhat confusing macro level, which is why we're going to keep on talking about it on the podcast.
Alrighty, so John, hopefully that has been useful. Let's see if we can be just as useful for Chris.
Hi, Rob and Rob. This is Chris from York. Loving the podcast and the content that you guys give out. It's been really helpful for me. I'm hoping you can help with this question on raising funds from a second buy-to-let. Just to give you a bit of background, I was very lucky to receive a bit of early inheritance, and with some savings, I managed to buy my first buy-to-let property outright. So I don't have any mortgage or any loans on it at all. I unfortunately didn't take your advice of splitting the money and using it as a deposit to buy multiple homes. I did think for my first one I'd be a safe bet to buy outright, but now I'm in the situation where I have no savings. It's all tied up in the buy-to-let house. The rent is coming in, which is good, but it's going to take me a long time to build up a decent deposit, especially when you're looking at at least 25-30% by buy-to-let mortgage. So my question is, how do I go about getting funds for that second buy-to-let? Can I get a homeowner's loan on my first buy-to-let? Do I have to get a buy-to-let mortgage on the second one and just build up my savings pot until I've got a big enough deposit? Is there another way that I can get into that second property now rather than having to wait and build up a good deposit again? Hoping you can help. Cheers, guys.
Chris, thank you for your question. And you know what? I love this show because we can have questions on QE and then go to a question which really is for beginners when it comes to buy-to-let. But it's going to help so many people because why would you know? You don't get taught these things at school or anywhere else, actually. Well, actually, maybe on the podcast. But there's not many places where you get to find out how to actually build a property portfolio. The answer is, Chris, is you can take out a mortgage on that property that's unencumbered, or in other words, a property with no mortgage, and you would get a buy-to-let mortgage on that property. And you would typically, and this is what the vast majority of people do, get an interest-only mortgage on that property as well. Now, we've covered in detail multiple times why you'd go for interest-only. But for now, if you just accept that's the norm, that's what you would do. So that then would give you the deposit to go and expand your portfolio further, if that's what you want to do. Now, typically, on a buy-to-let mortgage, you can release equity up to 75%. You may decide that you don't need that much, and you may go down to 60%. And if you do, then at 60%, you may get a slightly more competitive mortgage as well than, say, a mortgage at 75%. I would highly, highly recommend that you speak to a mortgage broker, one that understands property investment and works with lots of other property investors. So it's not just something they can do for you, it's something that they truly understand, and they can guide you through this process. But besides being a bit of an admin burden, it's not that bad, and it should be quite simple for you to do, particularly if you're only going to, say, take out 60%. But that's what Rob and I do. We use mortgages on the vast majority of our properties, and if you want to take a mortgage out as well, you can. So a simple one, Chris, but hopefully a really useful one for a lot of people listening.
Well, our work here is done. 2 more questions answered, and we'll do it all again next week. But before that, we will be back with a property podcast on Thursday, so we'll see you then. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.